Welcome back to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and I'm very excited to have with me today a very special guest, a constituent of mine.
That's right.
And also the former sheriff of Sacramento County and radio personality, John McGinness. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. It's great to have you on the podcasting side of things.
It is fun. This is kind of a new experience for me. So I've often, for a long time, I've marveled at your communication skills. So it's a great chance to see it in a different context.
Well, that goes both directions for sure. And I know the interesting thing with radio is you've got a lot of breaks and a lot of, time constraints, right? And podcasting is a little more casual.
I'm warming up to the idea. And even within the broadcast world, people are telling me you've got to embrace the podcast. So don't be surprised to see something develop.
All right. Hey, I would love to see that. Definitely would love to see that. And, I think that the podcasting space has really opened up a lot of avenues for people to communicate directly with. I know for this show, for example, we send directly to our constituents, and I know there's other listeners in Sacramento as well. But it's sort of a fun way to just have conversations and communicate. And it's definitely been something I've enjoyed. Before we dive into it, I'm going to ask you a little about your background because I definitely want people to get to know you a little bit. But we are going to be releasing this in early December, but we're recording it right before Thanksgiving. Right. So what is your favorite Thanksgiving food? What are you looking forward to consuming this week?
Well, you might be surprised by this, but my favorite Thanksgiving food is actually leftovers.
That's a good one.
The second iteration. I like turkey and cranberries on sourdough. That's a great,
That's pretty awesome.
In fact, that sounds good right now.
Honestly, I might go. I haven't had lunch yet, so I might go do that after this. Leftovers are an awesome part of Thanksgiving for sure. The problem is like the calorie continuation. Because like you don't want to waste all that food. Yeah. But then I end up eating Thanksgiving like 3 days in a row.
Oh yeah. It's one of my favorite meals overall. And honestly, it's pretty much on the healthy side. I think most of the Thanksgiving fare. So I definitely enjoy.
My wife makes like this yam dish that's probably my favorite. But and I love the green bean casserole. I know that's controversial for some people. But
and that's in the McGinness household. That's 52 weeks a year proposition.
Turkey's actually my least favorite part of Thanksgiving, but I've done a couple smoked turkeys. In the last year, just to like warm up, and
I do like turkey. I like the dark meat. I think
you like the dark meat is a little better. I'm not gonna lie. So, no, that's good. So, I'm looking forward to. What are you doing for the Thanksgiving holiday?
We're hosting.
You're hosting. All right.
Yeah.
Wow,
So I'm going to get out and play golf the day before with some mutual friends of ours. And,
sounds great.
And you and I have to get on the golf course.
We do.
We got to do. Let's make a commitment before Christmas. We'll play golf. Either I'll host or you'll host. Either way, I'm good. In fact, we'll
I'm
go back
happy
and
with
forth.
that. All right. Sounds good. We definitely need to do that because I will say, when legislative session let out in September, you kind of think, oh, maybe I can golf once in a while now. And I've golfed maybe two times since September, probably. Yeah. So it's been very busy on our end for sure, but still going well. But yeah, we're gonna be spending some time with some friends in Auburn, so it'll be nice. And
I'll bet the weather will be just a little bit nicer up there. About 2,000 feet above sea level? A little more clear sunshine.
It'll be nice, and then gonna try to see some of my family this week as well. So. Good. Yeah, it'll be fun. We're looking forward to it. Also, I'm taking my legislative team. We're having our holiday dinner this week as well.
Very good.
So we try to get together once a year, all of our team, and
excellent.
Thank them for all their hard work. So, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, most people know you as the former sheriff of Sacramento County. Obviously now. You have a show on KFBK, but tell us a little bit about your background and sort of how you sort of journeyed through law enforcement and how you ended up in the radio business.
Well, as a very young kid, I was enamored with law enforcement. Thought it'd be a great way to work and live, and I just liked it. In fact, I can tell you, my father was stopped for speeding by 2 Sacramento sheriff's deputies, and I thought those guys were they were heroes. They were great. They were cordial, professional, very squared away in their appearance. I thought, I like that. I want to be those guys. And actually was born in Chicago, lived for a long time in Phoenix as a kid, and liked the heat a lot. But wound up in Carmichael, and then went to school in Southern California thereafter. And honestly, I just loved it. I aspired to be a patrol officer. That was what seemed like fun to me. Then as time went on, some of the specialty assignments sounded appealing, including CSI and homicide, both of which I enjoyed very much. Rode a motorcycle for a living for a number of years and enjoyed that. And I have zero regrets about my career choice. I did not get into the business honestly, with any thoughts of promoting at all.
Yeah.
In fact, waited a long time, 15 years before I took the first promotional exam. And I kind of liked the leadership role and
awesome.
and fell in love with it, and had the privilege, honestly, I know this is what you're supposed to say, but it's the absolute sincere truth, working with some extraordinary people, just great people you could trust literally with your life.
Yep.
And anything and everything else, just great human beings who are motivated every day and every night to go out and do good work and protect the public. And what better group of people could you possibly want to spend time with? So 31 years of that. And about the time I announced my retirement and my support of Scott Jones to
Sure.
succeed me, I got a call from KFBK, the program
That's
director
cool.
there, and said, "Any desire to do a daily radio show?" And I said, "Sure, why not?"
Didn't even think about it.
I'm game. So we kept it a secret until when I actually
cool.
retired.
Yeah.
And I said, "I'll do it for about 2 years, maybe." Right? Well, that was 15 years ago. So
I cannot believe it's been that
it
long.
has.
I did not realize it's been 15 years.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I do a lot of litigation consulting work, and it's very busy, but I love everything I do. So the old saying, "Find something you love to do, and you'll never work a day in your life," is absolutely manifest in my life. I'm very
awesome.
lucky because people look at my calendar and think, "Wow, this guy works." Well, I socialize a lot, and I do things I have a passion for. So
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really this. I think that's the key to liking what you do, for sure.
Absolutely.
And, it's interesting. 15 years. So what is it? How's the radio thing changed over the last 15 years? Have you seen
Well, I think unfortunately there's some. It's not necessarily a part of the radio, but I see it from the perspective of the radio show. You and I are probably aligned on most major issues, but there's probably we could look and find something upon which we disagree. But we could sit down, I truly believe, and have a conversation and say, I'm not with you on this, Josh. Try to win me over.
Yeah.
And I would do the same with you. And we might get to a point where I would, I'd go 75, 80% your way. You might go 75, 80% my way. But at the very least, we would part friends and find some level of consensus. It seems like we've gotten so tribal in terms of how we approach public policy and so many other things. If the people wearing your jersey say this is right and that is wrong, you have to be locked in step in agreement with that, or else. And so I do see that as problematic, and that's a challenge, I think, that I actually throw out publicly. Let's first of all embrace truth and try to find ways to see what the other side might be talking about. And in some cases where one of the other things I'm seeing recently is the idea of seeking to criminalize everything with which you disagree. There is aberrant behavior that is shameful, disgraceful, and every kind of bad, but it doesn't rise to criminality, and it shouldn't be treated as criminal. It should be called out for what it is. And there are political remedies to those areas where we disagree versus going right to the justice system.
Yeah. No, it's been troubling, honestly, to see, really both administrations, right? Utilize the justice system.
This is not the purview of one side or the other.
Oh, totally. Yeah. But again, to your point, I think on the criminal side, that using the Justice Department, sort of politicizing that on both sides, and then also just this. I think in politics, this is one of the things that's really frustrated me in the assembly is I get along great with a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. But you don't always see that publicly, because publicly, I guess the desire or sort of the aim is really much more divided. In the media, in the talking points, and whatever it might be, politics has really become, I call it, sort of an age of hyperpartisanship, where we've sort of developed into this. It's all about scoring points, right? Scoring points for your side.
Yeah, and I think even establishing disdain for the other side, to go so far as to say, if you were to be seen out having lunch with one of your colleagues from the other side of the aisle, it would be perceived as somehow, bad, right? I'm old enough to remember a time when you would see people at a place called David's Brass Rail or Posey's Cottage, which are old institutions in Sacramento where the legislators hung out, but from the opposing parties who had vastly different beliefs on things, but they did get some things done there. There were deals worked out. The old stories about ideas written out on a napkin at Frank Fast, those are absolutely true stories, and oftentimes by members of the opposing parties.
Well, and it's frustrating because I think there's a lot less that divides us, than we think there are. But what we see the most in the media, the sort of the click nature of news these days, right? And sort of you need something outrageous, you need something people will click on. And then, honestly, politicians are being rewarded for going to the extremes, right? Whether that's the right or the left. I think you get rewarded for being sort of that fighter. And trust me, like I'm someone who will fight all day for the things I believe in.
Absolutely, that's what you should.
And will vote to strongly oppose things that I think are wrong for the state, and I will do that. But I also am willing to admit when, we can agree on this, So.
Or maybe there's a little bit about what you want that I can stomach in order to get most of what I want. That's compromise that I do think actually serves the collective purposes rather well.
Yeah, and so I do, I think some of us are, excuse me, I think some of us are hoping to get back to that, but, it's hard in this era of like, social media and sort of constant 24-hour news cycles. It's tough. It's been interesting actually watching this breakdown, and we usually don't get into federal politics, so we don't have to go too far into this. But this sort of breakdown between Marjorie Taylor Greene and the president, and it just to watch, and it's just bizarre, It's like
I see that as overwhelmingly counterproductive. And why does somebody? And it looks as though they were in lockstep agreement on things for a long, long time. And then I guess it was the Epstein files that divided them, I think.
Yeah, and then the irony is that the president ended up coming out in support of all the bills, or the bill anyway, which was in line with it's just none of it makes any sense to me. It's but I agree with you. I think we need to be better at developing consensus. There's obviously things that we always have to oppose and, I think work against if we think it's going to be detrimental for our districts or our constituents or the state, but there's a lot that we can work together on. It's funny when I have meals with some of my colleagues, like it does feel like, oh man, I hope this doesn't get around because this person is on the other side, but there's topics that we agree on, or there's things we work together on.
No, I think there's at some point we've got to get back to more basic. And again, I really truly agree with your premise that you especially any member of the representative government has an obligation to steadfastly stand by your principles. That doesn't mean you can't endeavor to try to get others to come your way by, first of all, comporting yourself as a gentleman, which you always do. And then also maybe trying to see what is it that you're really trying to accomplish. Maybe I can find something palatable in your goal, and we could reach consensus. So,
funny example, actually, I wasn't even planning on talking about this, but right before we came on the air here, I saw this article of a new federal bill being introduced by a former she was actually a former colleague of mine, now Congresswoman Laura Friedman, on the left, right. She was an assembly person here in California for my first term. And I got to know her a little bit. And we would talk about, she was a big advocate for public transit. And we would talk about, the challenges with that. And, I'm someone who rode public transit for 10 years and certainly am not against public transit, but I want to see it done right, and I would tell her like, look, I think you're right. Transit can be great. The problem is we don't design it to be great. We don't make it safe. We don't make it clean, right? We don't check tickets. We don't enforce the law, right? She introduced a bill this morning to fund more police officers on transit across the country.
Interesting.
As someone on the relatively far left.
Interesting.
And I was fascinated by that. And I thought, and she used to tell me, she said, Josh, I actually agree that we need to make it a place people want to ride, right? Because nobody's going to ride it if they're going to feel unsafe, if it's dirty, if it's, and we don't do that. And so I was fascinated this morning. I'm like, she wasn't kidding. She actually did this, which is pretty
Which I
interesting.
think is a substantial step in increasing the likelihood of use. And I don't have, this is not empirical data, but I cannot help but notice when I leave my office in the evening, I'll see the light rail train go by, and this time of year now it's dark, and those cars are lighted, and I can see the dearth of populace on those trains. There's nobody riding them, it appears to me.
Yeah.
Now, maybe a little bit earlier they were, but it just seems like they're overwhelmingly underutilized. It doesn't seem as though the basic creature comforts have been addressed adequately in those trains, and security, which is I think a huge issue. So good for her.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really interesting. And but again, someone that you can find consensus with, I think, is important. So so tell us a little more about your experience as the sheriff of Sacramento County. And then also, as part of that, are there any new challenges that you see law enforcement facing today that you didn't maybe face when you were sheriff?
Very much so. Yeah. So I had unfortunately, is an ongoing challenge in law enforcement. I had to bury a significant number of officers on my term as sheriff, which is a difficult thing to do. But I also had to lay off 122 sworn officers back in 2009. Thank God we were able to get some federal funding to bring those people back before the end of my term, before I retired. But it was a very difficult thing to do, and these were people, the overwhelming majority, if not all, that I had actually sworn in. They went to the academy on my watch, and oftentimes you had men and women who met in the academy as classmates and would establish a relationship, get married. They both got a pink slip. So that was a tough thing for them to endure, and had to lay off, reduce people in terms of rank. So 122 sworn staff and about half as many civilian staff. That was a real difficult thing to endure. And it was obviously financial conditions that were such that I saw it coming and was not necessarily surprised to see it develop, but I did quite honestly see a lot of people that seemed to be in positions of leadership and responsibility that were in denial. They weren't accepting the fact that that was what was on the horizon. Incidentally, San Jose PD, which is about the same size as the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, also had to lay off the exact same number of sworn personnel, 122. So it wasn't limited to Sacramento County. But I think as you look at fiscal responsibility, quite honestly, from the legislature, the executive branch of government in the state, as well as the local legislative bodies, the city councils, the boards of supervisors, the people who manage those scarce resources, what they do, the decisions they make, and the extent to which they wisely prioritize will impact quality of life without question. So that was a very difficult period in my career. Notwithstanding that, it was a wonderful experience. I'm happy I did it. But then in terms of changes since that time, you see from where you are in the legislature that there are people within that body, and regrettably they represent not just a majority but the supermajority in the legislature, that are really truly trying to undermine, I believe, the work of law enforcement. And one of the real critical issues, there have been attempts, as you well know, on qualified immunity for law enforcement officers. So prosecutors have qualified immunity, as I believe they should. Judges have qualified immunity, as I believe they should. Although sometimes I think we all grimace at some of the decisions that are made from the bench. Nonetheless, it's a tough challenge. I think they should have that. And law enforcement officers, I think without question, if you're functioning in good faith and compliance with the law and policy, I think there should be qualified immunity in play, without which I cannot imagine reasonable people staying in the profession. It's just
that's a good point.
It's not a tenable situation in which to find yourself. So that trend troubles me. I'll go back to a time when Governor Gray Davis, not a member of my political party, not somebody I thought was a particularly good governor, but he was extraordinarily vocally supportive of public safety. And I don't know where he would be today. In other words, the trends have changed, especially from his party. But at that time, he could not get close enough to us. In fact, he may have been too lavish in his support of public safety in terms of a lack of fiscal constraint and responsibility. But he was profoundly pro-public safety. He made some good picks to the parole boards, and I think
that's great.
Things have changed dramatically since that time, and I find it more than a little troubling. So it's a tougher, law enforcement, I think, is a tougher calling today than it was in my time. I also believe that the use of technology to include body-worn cameras and in-car cameras is an absolute asset.
You think it's a positive development?
100%.
Which I would agree with you on.
I
That for
absolutely
sure.
agree. And I think these young people embrace technology very well and understand how to use it. When we put the cameras in cars, we started in one division first and actually had a couple of high-profile incidents take place, one of which involved the use of deadly force. And it captured everything the officer did actually was a patrol sergeant, the Northeast Division. And everything he did was captured. There was no question as to what he did. The only question was what his state of mind was, which physical evidence and his own statement was able to really truly clarify. So within an extraordinarily short period of time, we had sufficient exculpatory evidence to show that, he acted not only in policy, but within the law. And so and a whole host of other things since that time, overwhelmingly supportive of the law enforcement action. And there are some, frankly, where officers have been found to have behaved in an improper and unlawful way, and it was good for the profession to have that found out,
held accountable,
and rid the profession of those people.
Yeah, and I think, on the one hand, right, it's important for accountability to the public, right? I think those cameras provide that. But in so many cases, to your point, it also protects the officer because there's so many he said, she said, things that can happen out there. And to be able to have that video evidence, if you acted appropriately, I think is a good thing. I actually have asked quite a few law enforcement officers I know about these things, and by and large, everyone likes them. They prefer them.
I think it's very much appreciated, and they have these are smart people, and they've managed to use that resource as a means by which to collect evidence also. Before the body-worn cameras were perfected, they would actually position the patrol car in such a way as to be able to get the maximum evidence from that encounter.
Interesting.
And of course, it records everything that takes place in that patrol car as well. So it was very interesting because we had public pressure from the community calling for the cameras, which again I supported. And actually talking with members of the DSA back then, and we're talking a long time ago. They said, we get it. We want them too. But I used the public pressure to help get the funds necessary because it was not an inexpensive undertaking to actually get those cameras on board. And then in very short order, when people would make outlandish, unsubstantiated, false complaints, then they'd find out, we'd play the video back to them and say, show us where the officer did that or where they made that egregious statement to you. I didn't know this was recorded. Shouldn't there be a sign on the patrol car saying this is being recorded? No, you have no expectation of privacy in a patrol car. So, but it was very interesting to see that switch. So I think it's overwhelmingly plus.
That is really interesting. And I agree. I think it's been definitely a plus. I think, to your point about the qualified immunity, though, I do worry about people wanting to go into the professional law enforcement. And I think, the changes that have taken place, maybe body cameras being a positive change, but potentially the qualified immunity issue being a negative, it's already hard enough to decide, do I want to put my life out there in service of the public as a law enforcement officer? And, does my family want me to do that? And then on top of that, to not know if you're going to be protected. When you're acting lawfully, of course.
Lawfully and within policy. And it's interesting. I think there's an element in society that's very reluctant to speak up in support of law enforcement because it's become unfashionable. But I do sense, and I hear this from uniformed personnel that I talked to today, they say no, they get a lot of positive commentary from the public. They have a hard time paying for their meals when they're out taking a lunch break because the public wants to buy. In fact, I had occasion, I saw one of our patrol cars at a restaurant on Arden Way. I had a meeting there, and I summoned the server and said, hey, don't say anything to the officers, but give me their check. She says, somebody else beat you to it. So as they're walking out, they see me and just assumed, and they came over and thanked me. I said, I'd love to take credit for it, but it was somebody else.
That's amazing.
And the fact, the senior of the two deputies said, we can't buy a meal. So that exists. I was at ironically, at a bank in Granite Bay. This goes back a few years, but very nicely dressed lady comes up to me and she looks around. She says, I just want to tell you, I support law enforcement. I said, ma'am, you're in Granite Bay. You can say it proudly here. So I think that is there, but for whatever reason, there seems to be a reluctance to say it because it has become unpopular.
Yeah, and so what are your thoughts on that? So, it's interesting because we obviously went through this defund the police sort of moment in our country. And I think that did catch hold for a short period of time, and to the point where it actually affected policy in certain communities is now in large part being walked back, I think, in a lot of places. I even saw an interview the other day, and I don't remember the person, but it was someone running for governor in another state or something. And they asked her about tweets from that period.
Oh,
about,
yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
I think that's the woman that's running for Congress in Nashville, Tennessee.
That is the one. Yeah. And she was on CNN or something. Yeah. It wasn't like a right-wing network,
no.
right?
And the anchor appropriately, did a good job interviewing her and say, wait a minute, do you stand by these?
Yeah.
And she says, I'm not going to play politics. Well, this is a legitimate question.
You tweeted these things out.
If you said it then and you don't believe it, here's your chance to explain that. If you still believe it, put it on the record. Let people know. Yeah. So, and I will say this: I don't know what the election outcome will be, and that's coming up very soon. But I do know, having spent a little bit of time in Tennessee, in the Nashville area, they are profoundly grateful for their law enforcement. Yeah. There's no equivocation. So I suspect that would not be a popular position.
I don't think so either. I think her tweets were something along the effect of, during that period of time, you know, about wanting to defund the police. Pretty extreme policy stances, I would say. And instead of saying, you know, like, I no longer believe that, but she also didn't say she believed it. Still, that was the interesting thing.
She wouldn't touch it. Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants to touch it. And I do think that does indicate, even as someone who, you know, she obviously, I think, does not support law enforcement.
Right.
As I would say most people in that state probably do.
Yes.
You know, even in that case, she's not willing to say that anymore. And I do think that kind of indicates that we might be moving back in the right direction.
I think so.
So I guess my follow-up question would be, are you optimistic or pessimistic? And let's keep it to California, right?
Yeah. About
the direction California is headed when it comes to public safety and maybe even the country, right? But do you think we're sort of shifting back to normal?
I think we might very well be shifting back to normal.
Yeah.
And I have hope along those lines. Not without some caution, but I do think that the kind of the wrong-headedness of the defund the police movement, and a basic understanding of the fact that, regardless of what your political stripes may be or what your philosophies are in broad strokes, you want yourself and your family and your assets, for that matter, to be protected, right?
Yeah.
To be safe. This may be an illustration of it. Karen Bass, who obviously is, I think she could be described as progressive. Mm-hmm. But she made, I think, a very wise appointment decision for police chief in Los Angeles. Jim McDonnell, who's a full disclosure, a dear old friend of mine. Yeah. And he tries to stay out of the political weeds in terms of partisan politics, but he is a very traditional law and order professional. He's a whip smart guy and seeks to do the right thing. And candidly, he had endorsed her opponent in the primary in the mayor's race. And she was aware of that, but she still said, "No, I understand. This is that was then. This is now. I think it's best to move in that direction." So I give her credit for that, and I think while it's a huge challenge he is doing a phenomenal job there. And I mean, the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles are facing some extraordinarily difficult times. If you look at the black hole of funds and finance in the state of California, I think LA City and County are really experiencing that to an extraordinary degree, because so much of the entertainment industry and hospitality business, which had really driven the local public coffers in LA City and County and the smaller suburban cities there as well, have really dried up. The motion picture industry has moved out of California to an extraordinary degree. Oh, yeah. Now, the people in the business still live here because, in Southern California especially, because they like the weather. It's a good place to live, but they are not producing their product in California. I have a good friend that's an old stunt man and does all sorts of, he started out building sets and he does stunts, and he developed something called a camera bike, where if you see a police pursuit in a movie or television show, a high degree of probability it was him, his crew that did it. And he's out of the state all the time now, out of the country.
Where does he film? I mean, where does he work?
Right
Georgia,
to work states, Canada, and he's actually been to Prague and a different place in Europe. But he's based in Southern California and loves it there. Wow.
But the work's just not happening there.
I will say this: there's a couple of things where I think the governor and the majority party in the California legislature are recognizing hey, we've made it difficult for the motion picture industry to do business and thrive here, and we do get a benefit from that. I'm not a movie fan at all. I just
You're not a movie fan. That's a controversial take.
I just don't care about it. I think I have undiagnosed ADHD because I can't sit and watch a dribble forever. But I understand there's a benefit to having that here, right?
Yeah,
and I encourage other people, if that's your thing and you like movies, see movies. But so the governor, I know, has moved in the direction of giving tax breaks to the motion picture industry.
Yes.
Well, why is it limited to 2 areas? If to the best of my knowledge, you've got more knowledge on this than I have, but it looks like the cannabis trade, they say, wait a minute, we've overtaxed these people. They're not producing anything. That killed it. And the motion picture industry, with regulatory environment and the taxation has pushed them out of the state. Well, what about every other business that's been pushed out of the state?
Yeah.
So
no, it's a great point. I actually was speaking with I won't say who, but as a former legislator on the Democratic side, who's also he's a filmmaker. He loves to do films, and he was sort of criticizing that what we did in California is just like a drop in the bucket for what needs to be done to the regulatory environment, right? You can't just throw a tax credit at something. I mean, obviously can be helpful, but that doesn't just bring the jobs back, and the amount of work going on in California now compared to what it was 20 years ago, is just vastly reduced. And that hurts, that hurts all the people that work in that industry. And, I guess it benefits other places.
I think it does. If you're looking for the silver lining, it's probably been good for the Carolinas and even Canada and parts of Europe where motion pictures are made now. So,
it's just a bummer. It's, cannabis being another topic where, again, not really on the docket here, but I think, in talking with some of the legal operators, right?
Yeah.
And how hard it is for them to actually operate and make a profit in California when the illegal grows and the illicit market is larger than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
And it's just incredible to talk to. Do you want a product that's regulated and safe? Which we obviously do. If you're going to have it legalized, I would say you do. You want that. You don't want stuff laced with fentanyl and all these other things. But at the end of the day, like we've made it very difficult to operate legally in California, and yet we have allowed an illicit market to thrive.
But that exact same phenomenon, I think, is absolutely undeniably in play in so many legitimate businesses. And just by way of full disclosure, I'm not a fan of the whole cannabis usage at this point, since it's impossible, I think, to unring the bell. So I don't advocate for criminalizing it again. But I think people need to be aware. There's medical research that's been done. In fact, CNN actually did a very, very good comprehensive piece and commissioned a survey, a very, very exhaustive survey, and found cardiovascular disease is rampant in people, whether it's eaten or smoked. I think schizophrenia and other psychological impairments as a result of. I think it's very bad for people. So my recommendation is avoid it like the plague.
Especially at the concentrations that they have now.
Precisely. Yeah, I think the stuff that the hippies in the 70s were smoking was probably
a little different.
Yeah. So again, I'm not advocating to change the law on it, but I do like the idea of informing people. Hey, make wise decisions and recognize you're going to live with the consequences of that.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, you talk about illicit markets, even the tobacco market or has a huge illicit market, and that's been legal for years, right? So I think it's pretty interesting, that, I don't know, we don't do more about that as well. So, so I guess first of all, I'll ask you, do you have any interesting stories from your time as sheriff that you think are worth the recounting on the air here?
There were so many, obviously I was in a time when there were a lot of extraordinary activities taking place. So we had the thrill killer, we had the Good Guys incident, still the largest single hostage incident in U.S. history, April 4th, 1991.
So tell me more about that one. What?
It was extraordinary. In fact, I'll tell you my experience. I was riding a motorcycle at the time in the Special Ops Unit, and so we were first responders for a whole host of things, including out-of-town mutual aid. And I was in court in a courthouse that no longer exists, the Fair Oaks Justice Court out in Old Town Fair Oaks. That was actually a court. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did not.
I don't even know what that building is now. 4200 Temescal is. I don't know what. I think it's. I don't know what it is, but I think it's a public building of some kind. But we had justice courts throughout the county then. Again, April 4th, 1991, and the judge summons me from the audience and says, hey, you need to get a hold of your communications center, and we'll delay, we'll recalendar your matter that's here today. So the call was, there's 4 young men, turns out they're Vietnamese nationals, that were holding people hostage at the Good Guys store on 65th and Florin.
Wow.
And that was at about 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the afternoon, and sometime around 11 o'clock that night it finally came to a conclusion. But 42, I believe, was the total number of people held hostage.
Wow.
3 innocent victims perished in it, and 3 of the hostage takers were killed by deputies. It was a big event, major event. And by the way, I got to see a whole lot of...
Why were they taking over the Good Guys?
They were so misguided. They wanted to get back to Vietnam.
Okay.
And there's so much irony out of that. These guys, by the way, they kept that group of people at bay. And there was a lot of fear. And obviously, people held at gunpoint by these guys, very, very well armed and a lot of ammunition. But the odd thing is they wanted helicopters to take them back to Vietnam. Well, that can't happen, obviously.
No,
You're never going to get there. And as they left their car, we found their car in the parking lot, and receipts from the retail store where they bought the ammunition. And on the car was the club, the anti-theft device. So your plan here is to get on an aircraft and go back to Vietnam, and yet you put the club on the steering wheel so somebody can't steal your car. But as all this goes on, and of course, it was an emotional day. It was a lot of risk, a lot of fear. And it was a TV store, right? Appliance store. So you had banks and banks, walls of televisions broadcasting this live. So I was up on the roof for a period of time. Now, I didn't understand about delays in broadcasting at that time, but I'm mindful of the fact that all these people, the hostage takers that are well armed, and by the way, the horrible combination of factors is somebody who has an abundance of deadly power and not a keen, wise mind. So they're going to do foolish things. But I'm thinking they can see our every step on the roof of that building.
Okay,
and so, but I had the privilege that day, and I'm kind of taking inventory. Again, this was April 4th, 1991, so it's been a while. And the people that I worked with day in and day out that just showed extraordinary valor that day. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. People are willing to charge that door, and the SWAT people that are actually managed to immerse themselves through an alternate entrance into the building and hide in a very uncomfortable setting. Big guys crouched down with all their armor and armament, just showing extraordinary patience. And then the sheriff of the county at that time was Glenn Craig. And I'd never seen the sheriff at any kind of a scene like that. But this was an international story. I mean, you had, it looked like the Super Bowl, the live trucks in the parking lot out there. And so everybody I saw along the way seemed to just execute their duties in an overwhelmingly impressive fashion, from the line troops to the supervisors, the specialists, and the top management of the organization. Everybody did very well. So very proud moment. At the same time, we lost 3 innocent victims, and actually testified in the trial of the one survivor. It was actually venue to San Francisco because of all the attention I got, which really, in the grand scheme of things, it was, again, an international story, so it was very well known. But that was a big deal. And then again, we had the thrill killer who on consecutive Tuesday nights would just go out and kill people in the art and arcade area, 2 people on Tuesday nighghts, so we saturated that area.
Always 2 people? Was that his MO?
Yeah, and so it was just ironic. You'd 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and on Marconi Avenue and Watt Avenue, you could fire a cannon and not hit anybody. People were scared, and but that was
what was his? I mean, was he doing it in the public? Was he going to people's homes?
He was going to convenience stores and restaurants, and it was actually at the time a captain in the sheriff's department, Phil Murphy, who retired as assistant sheriff, and regrettably we lost him. He died a few years ago. But again, a captain out there, not typically a captain's responsibility, but he sees this guy that seemed kind of strange, stops him. A guy, I believe he's on a bicycle, and detains him, gets his information. Turns out that information was put together by homicide to say, yeah, this is the killer, and he had the gun. Wow. So, again, some extraordinary things.
He had the gun on him.
He didn't know he had the gun at his home. And,
at his home, okay.
But some really very, very, very high-profile
So he just
events that
happened
took
to
place.
arrest this killer, not part of a...
It was a major operation.
Sure.
So I was in special ops at the time, so we were all pulled into to saturate the area. And the captain of detectives at the time, Phil Murphy, he was a great guy, by the way. It was just so far out of his normal routine. Captains are they're home at night, and they wear suits, and they don't. But he was out, and he went out to obviously to brief with us and make sure. He was that kind of guy, good leader, good man. And but to say he stumbled onto it suggested he didn't have some inherent talent, and he did. But he sees a guy on Watt Avenue, right in the area, and said, "Okay, this isn't right," and stopped him and detained him, had a cordial conversation with him, and gleaned information, and did exactly what good law enforcement officers do, even if they're a captain. So we were later on in our careers, we got a chance to work together very, very closely, and I always appreciated him. So those were the big deals. But then, I mean, the laughable comedic stories. That it just, people that do serious work, but they're still human beings, and funny things happen. So I had a very laughable story. I was riding a motorcycle at the time, and my partner and I were stopped to have a cold beverage at a coffee shop in Rancho Cordova. It was a hot day, and there's a homicide actually at the old Campbell's Soup plant.
Oh, yeah, the plant,
Yeah, and so we're out in Rancho, and the watch commander in South Sac's calling for additional help to set a perimeter because it's kind of a big deal, obviously.
Yeah.
So we jump on our motorcycles and bonsai down to South Sacramento. Not a bad thing for a young motor officer to do. Nice fast ride.
What would you take, Jackson Highway for that?
We took the Highway 50 to 99
Highway
South
50,
and cranked it on and went out, and we set up a perimeter, and this guy approaches me, and I'm right there setting up perimeter. I'm not going to do anything significant. That's my job, right?
Yeah.
And but I want to look cool because I'm a motor officer. That's what we do. And this guy comes up and wants to chat with me, and I'm kind of blowing him off. And he's a Latino, kind of a husky guy, and he's carrying a lunchbox. And he says, "Can I talk to you, please?" And I said, "What do you got?" "What?" I'm annoyed by his presence. And then he tells me, "I just shot him." And I said, "What? You did what?" And so he was, in fact, the killer, had the gun in his lunchbox.
Oh, my God.
You just never know what the day's going to produce for you, right? And, of course, I took all the credit for capturing the guy because all I did was volunteer for a high-speed ride on a motorcycle.
I chased him down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They had to call me from the neighboring division because that's how good I am.
This is what I do.
But in reality, I almost sent him away because I found him annoying. But
that's amazing.
So
oh my God.
That's the world. That's the business. And for people that right now may be thinking about, is this a good gig? Is it a rewarding profession?
Right.
When you seem to have a significant chunk of the media and the politicians against you, it is. First of all, go into it for the right thing. Do the right thing. Use your moral compass first. Tell the truth. Treat people with dignity. That doesn't mean if they're trying to do something horrible, you stop them and you use whatever force is appropriate to stop them, up to and including deadly force if you have to.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't treat them with dignity. If they respond in kind, you treat them, regardless of the nature of the crimes they've committed, treat them with dignity. And treat your peers well, and be true to the mission, and live a good life, and you'll have plenty of laughs along the way.
I love it. It's a great way to summarize it. So this is why you got to listen to the radio show. Right here. This is you hear all these gems on the radio. So so you're KFBK Sacramento.
KFBK Sacramento, 1530 AM, 93.1 FM, 3 o'clock weekday afternoons. And by the way, Friday, I got to give a shout out to Sam Shane, who took over for Tom Sullivan, who was obviously Tom was one of the people that got me into this business. A good friend. And Sam, I think, is doing an extraordinary job. So check his program out from noon to 3.
Well, how long? So you said 15 years.
15 years.
And you said 2, so you're 13 years overdue at this point.
So
you're gonna keep doing it? I mean, is that the plan?
I enjoy it, and the numbers seem to be very good. And
that's good.
It's therapeutic for me. And someday you're going to be an old geezer, and you'll embrace it because. You have independence, and I'm not on social media at all. And people say, "Oh, you got to be on social media." No, I don't, because I'm not selling anything. I'm not running for office, and I don't need to.
Exactly.
But I can also just be unabashed in my candor, and
that's good.
But always with respect, right?
No, always with respect. And honestly, I love going on your show, and
you're always.
We
welcome.
always have good conversations, and I do like, and it's one of the reasons I started the podcast. I'm sure you get the same feeling on the radio show, but it's a good outlet to sort of talk about this stuff because you have a lot of thoughts, right? We have thoughts, and I like to talk to people about them. but it's nice to be able to talk to people and share your thoughts. And
Honestly, one word to describe it for me is therapeutic.
That's good. No, it's true. Actually, it's really true. Well, speaking of therapy, let's talk about some of the stories of the week, right? Because this is sort of more what you do on the show, is sort of talk about the goings on. But again, this episode's going to release a little after we record this, maybe a week after, and so I tried to pick some stories that are going to still be relevant, but I think the big ones lately, I think, will be. The big one, obviously, off the top is sort of the fallout from this corruption scandal in Sacramento involving Dana Williamson, who was the governor's former chief of staff, Governor Newsom, as well as a couple other people in the Capitol community that are also in court over this as well. I guess just, we can talk about the story generally. I mean, I think the current situation is that, she's obviously been indicted and there's going to be a lot of court hearings and things like that. And you probably know more in terms of the process of all of that than I do. But, I think just sort of the culture of corruption, this is obviously one case, but I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's any more fallout from this over the next few weeks.
I think this.
Get your thoughts on it. Yeah.
I think this story illustrates a couple of undeniable truths. One of which is when people engage in misconduct, I don't care if it's a moral issue, a social issue, or a criminal issue. I have to believe that it starts with small steps. You take liberties with certain rules along the way, and because that first maybe there's an unsettling feeling about it, but then you get used to it, and then everybody's doing it. And I think in the California legislature, where you have, and I hate to pick on the legislature because you're part of the legislature.
Sure.
I think you're honestly you're a pillar of good there. But the supermajority is not good for either side. I truly believe that. Yeah. I'm a lifelong Republican, never been a member of any other political party. I'm very sincere in my beliefs on it. Believe in smaller government, individual liberties, doing the right thing, fiscal austerity, which I think both sides have lost
I agree.
A grasp of. But I think that supermajority really hurts, and there's nobody watching the store. I think the scrutiny that otherwise would be there is just not, and very candidly, the media is not what they once were. There was a very, very, very good presence of I think people who are called to be reporters and do a good job. During my time as sheriff, I had people that I actually got to consider friends that were reporters, and a couple in particular. One from the Sacramento Bee that I really liked. This guy, he's a great guy. But guess what? If we had some splaining to do on an issue, he was in my dish, as well he should be. Yeah. And if I had information that suggested that he was engaged in criminal activity, he gets no breaks, right? Yeah. That's how it's supposed to work. That has really, truly, I think, largely vaporized. So the environment was just right for it. But when I see the decisions made on the part of other defendants in this case, I see cooperation. I have to believe at this point that Ms. Williamson is in some serious trouble. And I must say that she is very well represented by a competent counsel. McGregor Scott is her attorney. He's a close personal friend of mine. And by the way, I got calls from people saying, how in the world can he do that? I said, because he believes in the system in which a defendant is entitled to zealous, enthusiastic representation. That's what he'll provide. He's smart. Yeah. And she was smart, I think, to retain him. I'm not a fan of hers, not by any stretch of the imagination, but in fact, I had a chance to learn more about her in the course of the Prop 36 campaign, and I thought some outright just incredible lack of encumbrance by the truth on her part in evidence. So I'm not a fan. But by the way, being a kind of a reprobate in terms of behavior, not being sincere and forthright with people, is not a crime. So she can't be prosecuted for that. But I have to believe that there's evidence here of significant criminality, and the reaction on the part of other co-defendants tells me that it's very real.
The plea deals.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if her case will go to trial or not. Again, she does have competent counsel. I think she's very well served in that regard. And but the silver lining to a scandal of this nature, I think, is people accepting the notion that there is still an element of observation as to what you do, and you should be held accountable. I wish there was more of that, and honestly, this probably would not have materialized if there was a healthier environment in that regard. So I have to believe this is a significant development, and I would not I don't believe it bodes well for Ms. Williamson's future.
Yeah, I think to your point about the supermajority, I mean, it's sort of this air of hubris, right? Of arrogance from the party in power that, you know, it can allow you to get a little lax on what, you know, on following the rules and what you're doing. And I think that's why we have opposition parties, right? To hold accountable the majority, right? And I think when you have such a imbalance like what we have in Sacramento, that accountability gets a lot harder. And, you know, I mean, the budget is a good example. They don't even need Republicans anymore on the budget, right? And so what do? You see, you know, $1 billion to high-speed rail. You see, you know, all these, you know, billions of dollars going to, you know, regulatory programs that are hurting businesses. I mean, there's a lot, you know, that I think happens when you don't have those checks and balances. But
absolutely, 100% true. This is the way it's supposed to work. By the way, it's also, I think, it goes back to one of the earlier topics we discussed. These people are in my tribe, so I'm not going to challenge them, right? And I again go back to my days, not only as sheriff, but as a supervisor and manager and commander in the sheriff's department. I love the people that work for me, but it was my job to hold them accountable. And sometimes it really, truly, a significant element of that is for their own well-being. So if somebody who's in your party is engaging in behavior that is not appropriate, not consistent with your beliefs and values and the way business ought to be done, as a good citizen, you have an obligation to challenge that and to cause them to be removed from office. Now, by the way, not if it's not criminal conduct, not to disgrace them criminally, or I should say with criminal force and effect, but rather to understand that's in the political realm.
Right.
And so it's, I think when we get some of the derangement, you hear that term, but I think it cuts both ways, where everything a particular person does is wrong because of that derangement, or conversely, they can do no wrong because of the same, I think, element of derangement, but in the opposite direction. Neither one of those are healthy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really funny. So do you remember former Assembly Member Mike Gatto? I think you probably remember him.
Yeah.
Los Angeles County legislator. He was on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think he's a decent guy.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. I've always respected his sort of approach to things, even though we don't always agree. And it was actually funny because we were talking about political scandals and how it's been so long since there's been a major political scandal in Sacramento, and not a week later, you know, this Dana Williamson story comes out. So apparently I spoke too soon. But I think it was interesting to see how people, even on her side, are describing her. And one of the most interesting ones, I think it was Gil Duran, who is the former communications director for Kamala Harris, described her as a mafia boss, essentially. And that's how she operated. And I think just having that reputation, and Prop 36 was a good example of this, because even during that campaign, she sent some very threatening emails to people on the other side, and was very forceful in fighting against Prop 36, probably in an inappropriate way, I would argue.
I would absolutely agree, yeah.
And, you know, so we saw these patterns and these trends before any of this happened. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that, but certainly I will say there have been a lot of people getting letters from the FBI notifying them, right, that there was communications intercepted. And I mean, I've heard from a lot of different people on this. And they're not part of the investigation, but, you know, there was a huge operation during that time period in 2024 where, you know, everyone was being monitored, really, you know, and they're now being notified of that. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what comes of this.
Yeah, and don't forget, our Attorney General's got some very interesting things taking place in terms of expenditures of campaign funds for an extraordinary amount of money for legal fees, which he attributes to his being either a victim of or witness to criminality. Well, this is the guy that runs a very large law enforcement agency where he has competent peace officers that investigate crimes. He's got an army of lawyers. Why, if there's criminality, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. So is he guilty of anything? Absolutely not at this point. Nothing's been proven or even alleged against him. But I do think that's an area of legitimate concern for people to look at that with skepticism and say, wait a minute, explain that. I've dealt with a lot of victims and witnesses to crimes over the years. And I would never, ever suggest anybody who feels as though they need legal representation doesn't avail themselves of it. That's important.
Yeah.
But I've never seen a victim of a crime, and I can't think of a witness to a crime who ever felt they were in need of legal counsel. And by the way, this is an officer of the court himself with a Juris Doctorate from Yale, of all places. It doesn't, 2 and 2
really
are making 7. So
yeah. It's really interesting. The other big story, obviously, Prop 50 aftermath. A Texas judge struck down the lines for Texas, so that could still apparently, get appealed, obviously, up to the Supreme Court. So we'll see what happens there. But when this episode releases, December 3rd, I think is our release date for this. That's also a big day for California and a hearing on their lines and whether Prop 50, lines meet the criteria. And what were the motivations of the people that drew those lines?
Therein lies the legal question.
Which is the big question, right? And which I would say that I'm going on the assumption that the lines will stand. So I keep telling people that.
I hate to say it, but
not that I want them to.
No, I understand. But it is predominant, I think is the term. That was race a predominant factor in drawing the lines.
Right.
Race can be an associated factor.
Sure.
But if it's the predominant factor, they're outside the Voting Rights Act. So that's, I think that's a legitimate question. I don't
know what happens there.
I don't either.
But I think that, this really demonstrates, I think, the race to the bottom that was sort of this mid-decade redistricting battle. And I think would love to see us call a truce on that nationally. I don't know if that's going to actually happen, but we'll see what happens on December 3rd. So.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, a couple final things because we got to wrap here. But I don't know if you saw the story, 911 system failure. So the state spent $450 million to develop a new 911 system that would have regional sort of operations across the state.
PSEPs.
They paid multiple technology companies to develop this, and they are now walking away from this. And we'll put the story in the notes. But it's they're now having to go back to the drawing board, and they're now going to they're now putting forward a new proposal to create now a statewide system that they're going to also have to pay for. So they're going to be coming to us for money for that.
Absolutely.
Which is hilarious. It's like you just blew $450 million on a failed system. Why would we entrust you with something else?
You look at this. This is one of many. I'll say they could have put that towards something. Those dollars towards something really useful and meaningful, like high-speed rail. Wait a minute, that's not such a good idea. But I look at this and I hear people say this has to be just grand scale corruption, and I don't say it's not. But I'm also generally tend to believe in Hanlon's razor, paraphrasing, don't attribute to malice that which can easily be attributed to incompetence or stupidity. So I think there's a lack of people watching what's going on. And there has never been a time in my life, and I think it's safe to say ever, where we had so much access to so much information, literally right in the palm of your hand, yet I think people are less informed on critical issues. And I hate to beat up your constituents. You have pretty good constituents. You're in a good district. But honestly, the number of people, I use this probably too often, but the number of people that you would encounter out in public that could name all the Kardashians but have no idea who represents them in the Assembly or the Senate or the House of Representatives and don't know what's going on. They don't pay attention. They don't. There was a period of time when I'd go talk to various service clubs and I'd say, how do you feel about the idea of no enhanced penalties for serial theft in the state of California? A terrible idea. Okay. What do you think about reducing the consequences for the theft of a firearm? Terrible idea. Yep. What do you think about the idea of decriminalizing effectively hard narcotics? Terrible idea. How many of you voted for the Safe Neighborhoods and Safe Schools Act, Prop 47? Everybody. Well, you voted for all that. So, I mean, the need for people to exercise their responsibilities to be good citizens, I think, is absolutely in evidence. So. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's a good point. So
I'm
actually interested
we can enforce that.
I'm actually interested in auditing this. So my team's sort of looking at that. Maybe we'll do an audit of that.
You did great work on the homeless experience.
No, and it brings back really good information. And I think something like this is something that we should be holding accountable, that level of taxpayer expenditure, right? So speaking of taxpayer expenditure, $1.1 billion on the Capital Annex Project. We don't need to go into it too deeply, but I just did a story did an interview with Ashley Zavala, KCRA3, who is one of those reporters, I think, doing
she does a very good job.
Really good work.
Shout out to Ashley Zavala, Julie Watts.
They still, Julie Watts, also great, but they will not, still will not share with their own legislature, the current costs, overruns, breakdowns. And we've asked many times. So I just wrote a letter to the governor asking for him to come in and assist us on that. He doesn't seem incredibly excited to do so. He's sort of laid this back at the feet of the Rules Committee and the legislature. Like, that's their job. It's like, yeah, we get that, but would love your assistance
but General
in getting this
Services
transparency.
reports
DGS
to him,
is his. Yeah, exactly.
And a cabinet level position, and they have responsibility. So, and his response, quite honestly, to, I think it was Ashley Zavala that asked the question, hey, I'm an old broke down street cop and a radio show host, and I knew about this this going on. Why would the governor of the state of California not know?
And his office is going to be in that building, by the way.
Exactly. So and I go back to the very foundation of this. I don't know that there was ever any kind of a need for improvement. I don't know. I did hear concerns about asbestos, and that probably should be addressed. But and I'm no expert, but I would suspect that disturbing areas where asbestos lies is probably not necessarily the wisest course of action. But I spent a lot of time in that building, and I didn't see it as a non-functional building.
I agree with you.
Not to address the non-dysfunctional people that occupy it.
I love it. All right, last question for you. They just announced that Waymo is coming to Sacramento County. And full disclosure, I'm very excited about this. But I wanted to get your thoughts as a law enforcement officer.
No, I think
it's fantastic.
I do too. And will there be hiccups in it? I believe there will be. I bought a new vehicle back in June. And it's got not complete self-driving, but pretty significant degree of self-driving. And honestly, it does very well. And
it does well. And I will say that Waymo technology is far beyond even that vehicle, right? The vehicles you can buy, those Waymos have a lot of technology. And among the concerns I have, again, I'm broad strokes, I'm very much in favor of it, but somebody being able to hack into it and cause those Waymo cars to do something bad. Or the emergency vehicle issue, or they can get and block police and fire. And
remember back in Los Angeles in the early summer or late spring, when the protesters were out because, because of enforcement of immigration laws. But the protesters set fire to Waymo vehicles.
I remember that.
Those Waymo vehicles all have lithium batteries in them, and they create an enormous, I think, threat to public health. And, of course, the firefighters wisely did not fight the fire because there's no reason you can't put it out and expose yourself to bad outcomes. So
it'll be interesting. I think, I think, and you were a motorcycle cop, so I think humans, in many cases, are the problem on the roads. It's not necessarily the vehicles, right?
Absolutely. There can be a glitch. There can be a breakdown anywhere. I would be more inclined to recognize.
Distracted driving, drunk driving, you name it, right?
Those darn cell phones. I mean, you see people all the time. As I drive down the road, I'm thinking, that guy's DUI. And no, he's not. He's texting. And man, don't do that. Don't do that.
So whenever someone tells me, like, these the concept is obviously bizarre, right? But these autonomous vehicles aren't safe. It's like, well, I'd suggest just try one out and see what because I will tell you one thing about autonomous vehicles. They are always paying attention.
Exactly.
And I can guarantee you that humans are not. So
is there an inherent risk? Yes. Can that be overcome? I believe so. And I would be more than happy to go on the maiden journey.
Exactly, right.
Would it feel a little unsettling at first, maybe? Yeah.
It's weird.
What I find in my self-driving vehicle is I have passengers that don't like it. Well, I feel very comfortable because I can take it over if I have to. But
that's a fair point.
Yeah.
It is trippy though when there's no one at the wheel, and you're like, this seems uncomfortable, right? But you sort of adjust to it over time. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
This obviously is after Thanksgiving, but I hope you and your family have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And I do. I think it's appropriate for me to thank you as a constituent, as a person who has had a bird's eye view of that Capitol and the dysfunction there and the bad things that have happened. Also to acknowledge the very, very good work that's done by you and a handful of your colleagues that I truly appreciate.
Appreciate that.
And as much as I badmouth the legislature, there's some exceptions, some very clear exceptions. And I'll even go so far as to say there are some on the other side of the aisle that I think really truly endeavor to do the right thing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate that very much. Our final episode of 2025 is going to be it's toward the middle of December, which is going to be with my lovely wife, Nicole.
Very good.
So stay tuned for that in future episodes. And then we're going to say goodbye for the year and come back in the new year with some more content. But if you have any ideas for the podcast, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. Follow us on socials or subscribe at pointoforderpod. And you can follow myself on X at Joshua_Hoover. John, thanks so much. It was great having you.
You've already told me to shut up. May I take one more?
No, please, please.
So if this airs on December 3rd, tomorrow, December 4th, John Kupal and the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association are doing an event, a Prop 13 saving signature drive at Rudy's Hideaway again.
All right.
It's not KFBK or iHeart sponsor, but I will take the day off and be out there to meet some friends and get signatures for that cause. Maybe you'll have a chance to
All right.
come by.
If you want to see John, Rudy's Hideaway on December 4th.
Tomorrow as you see this. So,
All right. I appreciate that, John.
Thank you very much for what you do.
Absolutely. And thanks for coming on, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
You got it.